Hey folks, so I just published a video covering how the saga between Anthropic and the Department of Defense in the US has panned out. We have had some newer developments and I just wanted to make this video to share those with you. So I have already explained the saga from A to Z in this video. I'll link this down below if you want to check it out. But let's do a quick recap anyway. So Anthropic was like, hey, we will work with the military on everything except autonomous killer robots and mass surveillance of Americans. And the Pentagon was like, we don't plan to do those things. And then Anthropic said, great, just put that in writing. Pentagon denied that, and then Trump banned Anthropic models from the entire government. So what happened is that on 14th of July last year, Anthropic and the Department of Defense got into an agreement that they will use Claude models in defense operations. And this contract was valued at $200 million. Then in January, so just 2 months ago, Trump captured Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro. So after he was captured, there were reports that the US military used Anthropic's AI model Claude in the Venezuela raid. And the gripe that Anthropic really had was hey, did the use of Claude models lead to any killings? So Pentagon's use of Claude during Maduro raid sparks a feud with Anthropic. After reports on the use of Claude in the raid, a senior administration official told Axios that the Pentagon would be reevaluating its partnership with Anthropic. Anthropic asked whether their software was used for the raid to capture Maduro, which caused real concerns across the Department of War, indicating that they might not approve if it was. Any company that would jeopardize the operational success of our warfighters in the field is the one we need to reevaluate our partnership with going forward. An Anthropic spokesperson denied that Anthropic has not discussed the use of Claude for specific operations with the Department of War. We have also not discussed this with any industry partners, including Palantir, outside of routine discussions on strictly technical matters. So, firstly note that Department of Defense and Department of War are the same things. And what happened is that someone from Anthropic, it's not clear who reached out from Anthropic to either Palantir or the Department of War asking whether Claude models was used. Anthropic officially denies that they did any such thing, but someone did that. And that's what sort of led to the Department of Defense rethinking their entire agreement with Anthropic. They don't want anyone to dictate how they use their technology. For the Department of Defense, they just want to be able to use Claude for any lawful purposes. So what ended up happening is that Pete Hegseth, he is the secretary of the Department of Defense. He gives Anthropic until Friday to back down on the AI safeguards. But what ended up happening is that Anthropic did dial back on some of their AI commitments. They said that competitive pressure prompts it to pivot away from a more cautious stance. So they did that, but Anthropic CEO rejected the Pentagon's demands to drop the AI safeguards. Those were the two things that he denied in particular were, and this is the statement from Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, and he said that we just won't allow the use of Anthropic for mass domestic surveillance and the use of fully autonomous weapons without any humans in the loop. These were the only two things he didn't want the government to do. They did sort of back down on their safeguards a bit, but they didn't budge from the use of using Claude for mass domestic surveillance and fully autonomous weapons. Then what we have seen is that Claude models are very powerful. If you are sort of thinking, hey, is Claude even really that powerful for use in military or for the operation of weapons? Then heck yes. An AI-powered hacker steals 150 GB of data from the Mexican government using Anthropic's Claude. I broke down the story in detail in the last video, so if you want to check it out, this is just going to be a quick recap of what has happened. Then Pentagon moves to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk. So after Anthropic didn't back down, Pentagon threatened that they would label Anthropic as a supply chain risk. They didn't take any concrete steps towards that, but they did say, yes, we will do that. They haven't taken any action though yet. Then employees at Google and OpenAI, they supported Anthropic's Pentagon stand in an open letter. They were like, hey, we also don't want the models that we are working on. So Gemini and ChatGPT models, we don't want those to be used in mass surveillance or development of autonomous weapons. So that's what employees at OpenAI and Google also wanted. Then what happened is that OpenAI's Sam Altman announces a Pentagon deal with technical safeguards. So as soon as Anthropic was, as soon as the Department of Defense said, hey, we will label you as a supply chain risk, OpenAI swooped in and they were like, hey, we have this partnership with the Department of Defense now. And this is where sort of things get tricky. And then Musk's XI also reached a same deal. But the real kicker is that, just a moment. The real kicker though is that, maybe I haven't opened the page for it, that OpenAI claimed that the deal that they signed with the Department of Defense included the same red lines as that Anthropic requested. So OpenAI claimed that they have gotten the Department of Defense to agree with them on not using their models for mass surveillance or for the fully autonomous weapons without any human in the loop. So things got a bit tricky. Like, it's so illogical that, hey, why would you not give Anthropic the same treatment here as OpenAI, right? Like, it doesn't make sense that firstly, if you are sort of labeling Claude models as a supply chain risk, then what will happen is that you will have to remove Claude models entirely from the entire military operations. Then if Claude models are labeled as a supply chain risk, then any contractors, any companies who work with the Department of Defense or the US government, they will have to show that they don't have Claude, that they are not using Anthropic's Claude models in any of their workflows. So that is that is such a laborious process, right? And things sort of move very quickly in the US military. You can't be like, hey, we will just take, let's say there's the 6-month transition period that Trump has announced for the government agencies to fade away and update their processes so they are not using Claude models any longer. But why go through those 6 months process anyway? Isn't that sort of like a security risk that what if US goes to war? They are currently in war with Iran, but what if something else happened? We will also see how things are panning out in Iran, but these 6 months, it doesn't make sense. Why would you sort of put your country at risk to go through this entire 6-month transition when you are figuring out, hey, which AI model do we have to use? If you are willing to give OpenAI the same terms that Anthropic requested, then why didn't you give those to Anthropic in the first place? That's where it seemed as if OpenAI was lying. And that's what people really questioned. And what ended up happening is that ChatGPT continues to lose market share. OpenAI sold out to the literal Department of War. They had 295% uninstall surge in one day, 1-star reviews up by 775%, 5-star reviews down by 50%. Meanwhile, Anthropic says no. Claude downloads move up by 81%. It passes ChatGPT in downloads and hits the first rank on the App Store in the US. So that's what ended up happening. And yes, Anthropic's Claude rises to number 1 in the App Store following the dispute with the Pentagon. Then OpenAI reveals more details about its agreement with the Pentagon. So let's just sift through this quickly. By CEO Sam Altman's own admission, OpenAI's deal with the Department of Defense was definitely rushed and the optics don't look good. So yeah, he admits that it seems as if OpenAI is lying, that it might come across like that. After negotiations between Anthropic and the Pentagon fell through on Friday, President Donald Trump directed federal agencies to stop using Anthropic's technology after a 6-month transition period, like I told you. And the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said he was designating the company as a supply chain risk. Then OpenAI quickly announced that it had reached a deal of its own for models to be deployed in classified environments, with Anthropic saying it was drawing red lines around the use of its technology in fully autonomous weapons or mass domestic surveillance, and Altman said that OpenAI had the same red lines. There were some obvious questions. Was OpenAI being honest about its safeguard? Why was it able to reach a deal while Anthropic was not? Exactly, it's so illogical. Then he even sort of did an AMA session where he tried to sort of diffuse this situation. So here is the original tweet. He said, "Tonight we reached an agreement with the Department of War to deploy all our models in their classified network." And then he was like, he retweeted this tweet. "Yesterday we reached an agreement with the Department of War for deploying advanced AI systems in classified environments." And then there was this blog post. And then he was like, "Hey, let's actually do an AMA. I would like to answer questions around our work with the Department of War and our thinking over the past few days. Please ask me anything." And then he sort of shared these 3 takeaways. "There is more open debate than I thought there would be, at least in this part of Twitter, about whether we should prefer a democratically elected government or in unelected private companies to have more power. I guess this is something people disagree on, but I don't. This seems like an important area for more discussion. I think this is a question behind a lot of the questions, but I haven't seen this quite articulated. What happens if the government tries to nationalize OpenAI or other AI efforts? I obviously don't know. I have thought about it, of course. It has seemed to me for a long time it might be better if building AGI was a government project, but it doesn't seem super likely on the current trajectory. That said, I do think a close partnership between governments and the companies building this technology is super important. People take their safety in the national security sense more for granted than I realized, which I think is a good thing on balance, but I don't think shows enough respect to the tremendous work it takes for that to happen. Also, I'm very grateful for the level of reasonable and good faith engagement here. It's not what I expected, but he still didn't answer. Why was OpenAI able to negotiate such a deal that Anthropic wasn't? And they were like, "Hey, we really don't know why." So obviously something doesn't seem right, correct? And then this was a bit ironical that Claude was used by US in the Iran strikes. Iranian missiles hit an AWS data center. Anthropic runs Claude on AWS, and then Claude was kind of down a few days ago. And then this was a very interesting tweet that I saw, and I loved this tweet. So let's go through this one as well. "Anthropic is executing the most effective consumer brand strategy in AI, and every move has been deliberate. 2 weeks ago, Super Bowl ads mocking ChatGPT's ads pushed Claude from 41st to 7th on the App Store. Then they publicly refused Pentagon demands to remove safeguards on mass surveillance and autonomous weapons. Today, Claude sits at 2nd across all apps. Katy Perry is drawing hearts around their subscription page, and that tweet got 6.2 million views." So this is the tweet in question. And then he says, "This is the Apple versus FBI playbook from 2016 running at 10x speed. When the FBI ordered Apple to build a backdoor into the San Bernardino's shooter's iPhone, Tim Cook published an open letter refusing to do so. Critics called Apple unpatriotic. The DOJ accused them of prioritizing brand marketing strategy over national security. Apple's response cemented a privacy-first brand identity that powered the next decade of iPhone sales and made what happens on your iPhone stays on your iPhone their defining consumer promise. Anthropic just compressed that entire arc into 2 weeks. Pentagon demands unrestricted access. Anthropic says no to mass surveillance and autonomous weapons. Trump calls them left-wing nut jobs. Defense secretly labels them a supply chain risk, a designation normally reserved for foreign adversaries like Huawei. And consumers respond by downloading the app so fast that it climbs 39 spots on the App Store. Now, look at what OpenAI did. Within hours of Anthropic getting blacklisted, Sam Altman announced a Pentagon deal on X. He claimed the same red lines on surveillance and autonomous weapons. The Pentagon accepted them without a fight. This tells you the Pentagon's dispute with Anthropic was never about the policy, it was about the politics. OpenAI got the same terms Anthropic asked for. The difference is OpenAI played the game quietly while Anthropic made it public. And that difference is exactly what's creating the brand divergence. OpenAI is becoming the institutional default. Ads in ChatGPT, Pentagon contracts announced on Friday nights, revenue optimization across every channel. Anthropic is becoming the product people choose because they trust it. That's the split that matters in consumer tech. The company that optimizes for institutional relationships eventually loses the users. The company that earns consumer trust compounds it. Ask Microsoft how the 2000s went when they had every enterprise contract and Google had all the love. Every Fortune 500 general counsel is now asking whether Claude creates Pentagon exposure risk. But 37,000 people just liked a pop star's screenshot of the subscription page. One of those dynamics creates enterprise friction. The other creates a movement. And movements sell more subscriptions than government contracts ever will. And then there was this breakdown. There was just this one takeaway which I had towards the end of this article, where it said that Sachin Seth, a VC at who focuses on defense tech, says that a supply chain risk label for Anthropic could mean lights out for the company. However, he said if Anthropic is dropped from the DoD, it could be a national security issue. And like I explained, the department would have to wait for 6 to 12 months for either OpenAI or xAI to catch up. That leaves a window of up to a year where they might be working from not the best model, but the second or third best. But like we saw, xAI and OpenAI are all already sort of getting onboarded by the Department of Defense. But the real kicker here is that could a supply chain risk mean lights out for the company? Now, like covered in the last video, out of the top 5 companies on NASDAQ, 4 of those companies have partnerships with Anthropic. And if Anthropic is labeled as a supply chain, then all these companies that I mentioned, all these 5 companies, they already have contracts with the government. So they will have to limit the work or their collaborations, their partnerships with Anthropic. So that might lead to Anthropic losing billions of dollars. And as we know, training AI models, deploying them, running them, it is very, very expensive. And these companies are already losing millions of dollars on a daily basis. So what happens? How will Anthropic sort of get the funds which are required to sustain its operations? And that's the only doubt that I had. Will Anthropic be able to pull through this mess? Yes, they are being ethical, and all of us love that about them. But what about the money? At the end of the day, you need money to run a business. Where will that money come from? But Sam Altman got a lot of hate actually. He said that there was a tweet that way he replied about the internal memo that they had with the Department of War. Here's the repost of an internal post. We have been working with the Department of War to make some additions to our contract, to our agreement, to make our principles very clear. We are going to amend our deal to add this language in addition to everything else. And then he sort of said, hey, consistent with applicable laws, including the 4th Amendment to the United States Constitution, this AI system shall not be intentionally used for domestic surveillance. For avoidance of doubt, the department understands this limitation to prohibit deliberate tracking, surveillance, or monitoring of US persons or nationals, including through the procurement or use of commercially acquired personal or identifiable information. It's critical to protect the civil liberties of Americans, and there was so much focus on this that we wanted to make this point especially clear, including around commercially acquired information. Just like everything we do with iterative deployment, we will continue to learn and refine as we go. I think this is an important change. Our team and the Department of War team did a great job working on it. The department also affirmed that our services will not be used by the Department of War intelligence agencies, for example, the NSA. Any services to these agencies would require a follow-on modification to our contract. For extreme clarity, we want to work through democratic processes. It should be the government making the key decisions about society. We want to have a voice and a seat at the table where we share our expertise and to fight for principles of liberty. But we are clear on how the systems work. Because a lot of people have asked if I received what I believed was an unconstitutional order. Of course, I would rather go to jail than follow it. Then there are many things that the technology isn't ready for, and many areas we don't understand the trade-offs required for safety. We'll work through these slowly with the Department of War, with technical safeguards and other methods. One thing I think I did wrong. We shouldn't have rushed to get this out on Friday. The issues are super complex and demand clear communication. We were genuinely trying to de-escalate things and avoid a much worse outcome. But I think it just looked opportunistic and sloppy. Good learning experience for me as we face higher stake decisions in the future. In my conversations over the weekend, I reiterated that Anthropic should not be designated as a supply chain risk, and that we hope the Department of War offers them the same terms we have agreed on. But yeah, some people ended up replying that, hey, came back on this least politically neutral platform to just say, I am canceling my ChatGPT subscription. So you assure that your Department of Defense contract won't be used to surveil US citizens for the state, but see no issue with it being used for the same on foreign private citizens. Gross. And that's exactly the issue I have as well. That ChatGPT is used by millions. I think they are about to hit, they have already hit 900 million active weekly users. What happens if when they hit a billion users? US just has, I think, 200, 250 million people at this point, maybe 300 million, but about two-thirds of the audience lives outside the US. Is if you know that the very ChatGPT models that you are using, if you know that they can be used for collecting information about you or for surveillance in your country, how would you feel about that? Would that be something you would be comfortable with? I don't think so. And that's the gripe a lot of people have had. And that's why ChatGPT has lost 1.5 million users amid this Pentagon deal. ChatGPT was, I think, quickest back when it launched to touch a million users. And it's probably going to be one of the fastest platforms to use a million users as well. And another movement which has sort of been, which has led to people getting off ChatGPT is the Keep 4.0 movement. So GPT 4.0 was very much loved by the community. They praised its personality and they loved it so much that they wanted OpenAI to keep for it. OpenAI even extended the retirement deadline for GPT 4.0. They made it available to plus to ChatGPT Plus users. So that's the $20 per month subscription tier. So if you're paying $20 or higher to OpenAI, then you could have used that model for a while. Then a few months ago, they retired the model completely. They removed it from ChatGPT. They removed it from the API. And then people were like, hey, no, you shouldn't have removed it. And then there were some tweets about it that, hey, 4.0, you should have kept 4.0. And like that's what this Keep 4.0 movement is about. Bring back 4.0, keep 5.1, and then so yeah, people like ChatGPT 4.0 a lot, and they were not happy that it was removed from the platform, and that's why there was this another reason why people are also getting off ChatGPT. Now let's take a look at some of the developments we have had over the last few hours. So the US military is still using Claude, but defense tech clients are fleeing. The aftermath of Anthropic's dispute with the Department of Defense has left the company in an awkward place, being both physically active in use as part of the ongoing conflict between the US and Iran and decoupling from many of its clients in the defense industry. Part of the confusion is the overlapping and contradictory restrictions made by the US government. President Trump has directed civilian agencies to discontinue use of Anthropic products, but the company was given 6 months to wind down its operations with the Department of Defense. The next day, the US and Israel launched a surprise attack on Tehran, which is the capital of Iran, entering a continued conflict before Trump's directive could be fully executed. The result is that as the US continues its aerial attack on Iran, Anthropic models are being used for many targeting decisions. And while Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has pledged to designate the company as a supply chain risk, no official steps have been taken to that end. So there are no legal barriers to using the system. An article in the Washington Post on Wednesday unearthed new details on how Anthropic systems are being used in conjunction with Palantir's Maven system. As Pentagon officials planned the strikes, the system suggested hundreds of targets, issued precise location coordinates, and prioritized those targets according to importance, the Post reports. The article characterized the system's function as real-time targeting and target prioritization. At the same time, many companies involved in the defense industry have already replaced Anthropic's models with competitors. Lockheed Martin and other defense contractors began swapping out the company's models this week, according to a Reuters report. Many subcontractors are caught in a similar bind. a managing partner at J2 Ventures told CNBC that 10 of his portfolio companies have backed off of their use of Claude for defense use cases and are in active processes to replace the service with another one. The biggest open question is whether Hexaeth will make good on the supply chain risk designation, which would likely result in a heated legal case. But in the meantime, one of the leading AI labs is quickly being partitioned out of military tech, even as it's used in an active war zone. So that's the dilemma that US government agencies and their contractors are in. Should they begin phasing out Claude, or is there a chance that the department might backtrack? And that's what we are going to look into. That might actually happen. But before that, we do have that Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei calls OpenAI's messaging around the military deal straight up lies. What Dario Amodei ended up doing is that he sent an internal memo to the company's employees, and we're going to go through that memo. It's quite lengthy, but yeah, it makes a couple of things clear. So I want to be very clear on the messaging that is coming from OpenAI and the mendacious nature of it. This is an example of who they really are, and I want to make sure everything sees it for what it is. Although there is a lot we don't know about the contract they signed with the Department of War, short for the Department of Defense as well, and maybe they don't even know as well. It could be highly unclear. We do know the following. Sam Altman's description and the Department of War description give the strong impression, although we would have to see the actual contract to be certain, that how their contract works is that the model is made available without any legal restrictions or lawful use. But there is the safety layer, which I think amounts to model refusals that prevents the model from completing certain tasks or engaging in certain application. Safety layer could also mean something that partners such as Palantir, Anthropic's business partner for serving US agency customers, tried to offer us during these negotiations, which is that they on their end offered us some kind of classifier or machine learning system or software layer that claims to allow some applications and not others. There is also some suggestions of OpenAI employees, shorthand for forward deployed engineers, looking over the usage of the model to prevent bad applications. Our general sense is that these kinds of approaches, while they don't have zero efficacy, are in the context of military applications maybe 20% real and 80% safety theater. The basic issue is that whether a model is conducting applications like mass surveillance or fully autonomous weapons depends substantially on wider context. A model doesn't know if there's a human in the loop in the broad situation it is in for autonomous weapons, and doesn't know the provenance of the data it is analyzing. So doesn't know if this is US domestic data versus foreign data. Doesn't know if it's enterprise data given by customers with consent or data brought in sketchier ways. We also know those in safeguards know painfully well that refusals aren't reliable and jailbreaks are common, often as easy as just misinforming the model about the data it is analyzing. An important distinction here is that makes it much harder than the safeguards problem is that while it's relatively easy to determine if a model is being used to conduct cyber attacks from inputs and outputs, it's very hard to determine the nature and context of those cyber attacks, which is the kind of distinction needed here. Depending on the details, this task can be difficult or impossible. The kind of safety layer stuff that Palantir offered us and presumably also offered OpenAI is even worse. Our sense was that it was almost entirely safety theater, and that Palantir assumed that our problem was you have some unhappy employees. You need to offer them something that placets them or makes what is happening invisible to them. And that's the service we provide. Finally, the idea of having Anthropic or OpenAI employees monitor the deployments is something that came up in discussion within Anthropic a few months ago when we were expanding our classified AUP, which is acceptable use policy, of our own accord. We were very clear that this is possible only in a small fraction of cases, that we will do it as much as we can, but that it's not a safeguard people should rely on and isn't easy to do in a classified world. We do, by the way, try to do this as much as possible. There's no difference between our approach and OpenAI's approach here. So overall, what I'm saying here is that the approaches OpenAI is taking mostly do not work. The main reason OpenAI accepted them and we did not is that they cared about placating employees and we actually cared about preventing abuses. They don't have zero efficacy and we are doing many of them as well, but they are nowhere near sufficient for purpose. It is simultaneously the case that the Department of War did not treat OpenAI and us the same here. We actually attempted to include some of the same safeguards as OpenAI in our contract, in addition to the AUP, which we considered the more important thing, and the Department of War rejected them with us. We have evidence of this in the email chain of the contract negotiations. Thus, it is false that OpenAI's terms were offered to us and we rejected them. At the same time, that it is also false that OpenAI's terms meaningfully protect them against domestic mass surveillance and fully autonomous weapons. Finally, there is some suggestion in Sam Altman's language that the red lines that we are talking about, fully autonomous weapons and domestic mass surveillance, are already illegal, and so an AUP about these is unnecessary. This mirrors and seems coordinated with the Department of War's messaging. It is, however, completely false. As we explained in our statement yesterday, the Department of War does have domestic surveillance authorities that are not of great concern in an pre-AI world, but take on a different meaning in a post-AI world. For example, it is legal for the Department of War to buy a bunch of private data on US citizens from vendors who obtained that data in some legal way, often involving hidden consent to sell it to third parties, and then analyze it at scale with AI to build profiles of citizens, their loyalties, and their movement patterns. Notably, near the end of the negotiation, the Department of War offered to accept our current terms if we deleted a specific phrase about analysis of bulk acquired data, which was the single line in the contract that exactly matched the scenario we were most worried about. We found that very suspicious. On autonomous weapons, the Department of War claims that human in the loop is the law, but they are incorrect. It is currently Pentagon policy set during the Biden administration that a human must be in loop of firing a weapon, but that policy can be changed unilaterally by Pete Hegseth, who is the Defense Secretary, which is exactly what we are worried about. A lot of OpenAI and Department of War messaging just straight up lies about these issues or tries to confuse them. So this is what the internal memo is about. And then let's also take a quick look at the Financial Times report. A few hours ago, the Financial Times reported the following about Dario Amodei being back in talks with the Pentagon about their AI deal. And this is what we were going to take at look next, but let's just read it here. So it says, Dario Amodei has been holding discussions with Emil Michael, Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, in a bid to iron out a contract governing the Pentagon's access to Anthropic's AI models, according to multiple people with the knowledge of the matter. Agreeing a new contract would enable the US military to continue using Anthropic's technology and greatly reduce the risk of the company being designated as a supply chain risk, a move threatened by the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Friday but has not yet been enacted on. The attempt to reach a compromise agreement follows the spectacular collapse of talks last week. Michael attacked Dario Amodei as a liar with a god complex on Thursday. Deliberations broke down a day later after the pair failed to agree language that Anthropic felt was essential to prevent AI being used for mass domestic surveillance, which is one of the company's red lines, alongside lethal autonomous weapons. Near the end of the negotiations, the department offered to accept our current terms if we deleted a specific phrase about analysis of bulk acquired data, which was the single line in the contract that exactly matched this scenario we were most worried about. We found that very suspicious, Amodei wrote in the memo above, as we saw. In the note, which is likely to complicate negotiations, Amodei wrote that much of the messaging from the Pentagon and OpenAI, which struck its own agreement with Hexeth on Friday, was just straight up lies about these issues or tries to confuse them, like we saw. Amodei suggested that Anthropic had been frozen out because we haven't given dictator-style praise to Trump, in contrast to OpenAI's chief Sam Altman. Anthropic was first awarded a $200 million contract with the US Department in July last year and was the first AI model to be used in classified settings and by the national security agencies. The fight between Anthropic and the government escalated after the Pentagon pushed for AI companies to allow their technology to be used for any lawful purpose. It culminated in Hexeth declaring last week that he planned to designate the company a supply chain risk, obliging businesses in the military supply chain to cut ties with Anthropic. Anthropic and the Pentagon declined to comment. So that's how the situation is currently. That's where we are at currently. Dario Amodei, they are back in talks, but how does that pan out is anyone's guess. Will they be? I'm pretty sure that Anthropic is not going to budge from the red lines that they have drawn. They will not allow the use of Claude for autonomous weapons or for mass surveillance. But the question we also need to ask here is that it's domestic mass surveillance. So this is strictly restricted to Americans. What about countries outside of the US? There are billions of users that millions at least that these companies have outside of the US. So are we comfortable with the idea that Claude, OpenAI, Grok, Gemini models maybe are getting used to spy on us? Is that something we are comfortable with? That's what we have to think about, in my opinion. And then the street sort of summarizes that note again, that after getting blackmailed by the Pentagon, Dario Amodei wrote the most unhinged CEO memo in the Silicon Valley history. He called OpenAI's Pentagon safety theater. He says that Trump admin hates them because they haven't given dictator-style praise to Trump, which Sam has. Names Greg Brockman's $25 Trump super PAC donation by name, says that they supported AI regulation, which is against their agenda. Says they told the truth about AI policy issues like job displacement. The Palantir exposure reveals that Palantir's actual pitch to Anthropic during negotiations was that, hey, you have some unhappy employees, you need to offer them something that blesses them or makes them what is happening invisible to them, and that's the service we provide. Palantir's pitch wasn't safety, it was concealment. Palantir offered a classifier to detect red line violations. Dario was like, hey, models get jailbroken and monitoring only works in a few cases, maybe 20% real and 80% safety theater. Says Palantir offered OpenAI the same package. OpenAI accepted it. Says Sam Altman is peddling narratives to his own employees. Calls OpenAI's sort of a gullible bunch due to selection effects. Says the attempted spin or gaslighting isn't working on the public or the media, but is working on some Twitter morons. Says his main concern is making sure it doesn't work on OpenAI's employees too. By the way, near the end of the negotiation, Pentagon offered to accept all of Anthropic's terms if they deleted one phrase. Analysis of bulk acquired data, like we saw. Anthropic refused, and then the same surveillance clause Pentagon said they didn't even want to do. Meanwhile, Altman told his employees, you don't get to weigh in on that. And we also have another scoop that White House is doubtful on a Pentagon Anthropic reconciliation. So, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei's comments on to staff disparaging the Trump administration could blow up chances of a resolution between the AI company and the Pentagon, an administration official tells Axios. Rival OpenAI and lawmakers across party lines are pushing for an agreement as the Pentagon's threat to designate Anthropic a supply chain risk looms. The information reported that Amodei sent a memo to the staff on Friday saying that President Trump disliked Anthropic for not giving him dictator-style praise. Amodei said the OpenAI Pentagon deal was safety theater. Ultimately, this is about our warfighters having the best tools to win a fight. And you can't trust Claude isn't secretly carrying out Dario's agenda in a classified setting, the administration official added. Anthropic has maintained it does not want operational control over the Pentagon's use of Claude and that it should be left to warfighters, a source familiar told Axios. Company executives have also told the Pentagon that they regret that sentiment wasn't captured well in the media coverage, the source added. The two sides have been making progress towards a resolution over the past couple of days, and it's unclear how much the leaked memo will derail talks, a source told Axios. Again, the bottom line is it's been a highly public standoff between the Pentagon and Anthropic, with personal insults aplenty. It appears not much is changing. So that's where we are at currently. It's not clear whether things between the US government and Anthropic will resolve. If they do, the best thing that will happen for Americans is that their military won't have to go through that 6 to 12-month transition period where they would be using the second or third best model. The US military has said that Claude models are the best at what they do, so they do want to continue using them. But of course, if Anthropic is labeled as a supply chain risk, then they will have to stop using those models. So will have to their contractors and subcontractors as well. So yes, that's where we are at. But I will just reiterate here that millions of people are deleting their ChatGPT accounts or canceling their ChatGPT subscriptions for the very reasons. Firstly, that there is the Keep Foro movement that is going on. OpenAI has removed that model entirely. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is that OpenAI swooped in and apparently what it seems is that they are lying to people. It's your call to take whether they are lying to you or not. But what I do want to reiterate is that whether it's Grok, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's Claude or Gemini, if they are getting contracted by the US Department of Defense, the very terms that they have are that their models should not be used for domestic surveillance. But what about foreign surveillance? Is that something you would be comfortable with? Is that something these companies should do? I don't think a lot of people have brought up the issue that AI technology, yes, it's very powerful, and we have seen how it can sort of how AI can draw patterns from scattered data, and then that data can be tied to you to make predictions about you. And yeah, that's where surveillance comes in. But yes, one of the concerns that I do have is that what are the terms these companies have for foreign surveillance, and how are the foreign governments, so governments which are not the United States, how do they go about it? That's why I think it is very important for every country to have its own AI systems in place. If they don't, then they'll probably have to sign a contract with maybe OpenAI, Google, xAI, or Anthropic. And we are not very clear about their terms on foreign surveillance. How do we know that they won't use that data for spying on the citizens of the country that they are contracting with? How can the governments be so sure? And like we have seen, the wording in contracts, how Palantir worded things with Anthropic, they are trying to hide the domestic surveillance from Anthropic's employees. What if similar verbiage ends up there in contracts that governments sign with these companies? So we are not very sure. And I think this is something all of us need to be afraid about. AI is not a technology. Yes, it's very helpful, but it's also going to be a weapon that governments might deploy. And we have already seen how Claude was used to hack into the Mexican government. And it's very likely that these companies might use our data in ways that we might not consent to. So that's why I think it's very important each country is self-sufficient in its AI capabilities and they don't have to rely on any foreign vendor. So yeah, that's the mini rant I had. I think a lot of people are rightfully canceling their ChatGPT subscriptions because OpenAI is not being ethical. But I also think another reason all of us need to worry about is whether these companies might use AI systems for surveillance in foreign countries. There is nothing about foreign surveillance that has been talked about. I haven't seen these talks much on X or YouTube, so that's why I just wanted to bring up this topic. So yeah, that's those are the recent developments that we have between the ongoing saga between Anthropic and the US government. If there are any more updates, I'll keep you guys posted. But I hope you found this video helpful. If that was the case, like, share, subscribe, follow, etc. You know the drill. Do that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.